In the time before memory, when the world was young and the gods walked among mortals, there existed warriors whose very souls would be forever changed by an ancient pact. This is the tale of how the companions of Skyrim first embraced the beast within, a story that begins not with battle cries, but with whispers in the darkness. Long ago, in the halls of Jorrvaskr, a terrible secret was born. The greatest warriors of the north faced a choice that would echo through eternity. Some say it was desperation that drove them to seek the forbidden gift. Others whisper it was destiny itself that called to them in the form of silver eyes gleaming in moonlight. But before we speak of transformation, of blood and moonlight and the howling of wolves, we must first understand what they were before the change. We must journey back to those peaceful days when the companions were merely mortal men and women, bound by honor and brotherhood, unaware that their fate would soon intertwine with the ancient spirits that roamed the frozen wilderness of Skyrim. The story begins in the early Fourth Era, when Whiterun stood as a beacon of civilization against the endless expanse of tundra and mountain. The great mead hall of Jorrvaskr dominated the city's skyline, its carved dragon head watching over a brotherhood of warriors unlike any the world had known. These were not sellswords or mercenaries driven by coin. They were guardians of the old ways, protectors of the innocent, keepers of oaths sworn in blood and sealed with honor. Within those ancient walls, where the smoke of countless hearthfires had darkened the wooden beams black as midnight, the companions lived according to principles that stretched back to the legendary Jorrvaskr himself. They asked for no payment beyond a warm meal and a place to sleep. They sought no glory beyond a worthy death in honorable combat. They feared no enemy, mortal or otherwise, that threatened the innocent people of Skyrim. Yet even these mighty warriors, these paragons of Nordic virtue, would soon discover that there are some enemies that cannot be defeated with sword and shield alone. There are some battles that require more than mortal strength, more than human courage. There are some sacrifices that demand not just life, but the very essence of what it means to be human. The first sign came on a night when the twin moons hung full in the star-filled sky, casting silver light across the training grounds, where young warriors practiced their forms. Kodlak Whitemane, the harbinger of the companions, stood watching from the great hall's entrance, his weathered face troubled by dreams that had haunted his sleep for 7 nights running. In these visions, he saw wolves the size of horses running alongside his warriors, their eyes burning with an intelligence that spoke of more than mere animal cunning. But dreams, even prophetic ones, were not enough to prepare him for what would come. None of them were prepared for the visitor who would arrive before dawn, bringing with her an offer that would change everything. She came from the deepest wilderness, from places where few mortals dared to tread, where the boundary between the world of men and the realm of spirits grew thin as morning mist. Her name was Alla, though she bore little resemblance to the huntress who would later become legend. In those days she was something far older, far more dangerous. She was a messenger of Hircine himself, the Daedric prince of the hunt, and she carried with her a gift that would elevate the companions beyond the limitations of mortal flesh. But gifts from the Daedra always come with a price, and this price would be paid not in gold or glory, but in the fundamental nature of what they were. That night, as the companions gathered around their great table for their evening meal, none of them suspected that they stood at the threshold of transformation. They spoke of honor and brotherhood, of the battles they had won and the enemies they had defeated. They raised their horns of mead in toasts to fallen comrades and future victories, but they were content in their mortality, secure in their purpose, unaware that before the sun rose again, some among them would have taken the first steps down a path from which there could be no return. The choice would not be offered to all. Only those deemed worthy by ancient spirits would be given the opportunity to transcend their human limitations. Only those whose hearts burned with the purest dedication to the hunt, to the protection of Skyrim and its people, would be considered for the gift that Hircine himself had blessed. But the transformation would not come without cost, and that cost would echo through generations of companions yet unborn. For on that night, when the moon hung full and silver in the endless sky, the first of the circle would be chosen, and with their choosing, the ancient pact would be sealed in blood that was no longer entirely human. The morning after Ayala's arrival dawned clear and cold, with frost painting delicate patterns across the windows of Jorrvaskr's great hall. The ancient mead hall stood as it had for countless generations, its massive wooden beams hewn from the trees of Jorrvask's time, its stone foundation laid by the hands of the first companions who had followed the legendary hero from the shores of Atmora to this new land of promise and peril. Within those hallowed walls, the daily rhythm of companion life continued as it always had. Young warriors rose before the sun to practice their sword forms in the training yard, their breath forming clouds in the crisp morning air as steel rang against steel in carefully choreographed displays of martial skill. The sound of their training echoed across Whiterun's markets, a comforting reminder to the city's citizens that their protectors remained vigilant, ready to defend them against whatever threats might emerge from Skyrim's wild places. Kodlak Whitemane moved through the hall with the quiet authority that had made him one of the most respected harbingers in the Companion's long history. His hair had long since turned white as fresh snow, and lines of wisdom and worry creased his weathered face, but his eyes still held the fire of a true warrior. He had earned his position not through political maneuvering or inherited privilege, but through decades of honorable service, through battles won and comrades saved, through the countless small acts of courage and compassion that defined what it meant to be a true companion. This morning, however, something was different. The other members of the circle had noticed it immediately. Kodlak's usual peaceful demeanor was touched with an underlying tension, as if he wrestled with thoughts too heavy for words. He moved through his morning routine with mechanical precision, but his mind was clearly elsewhere, focused on matters that none of his shield brothers could fully understand. The cause of his distraction sat quietly in the corner of the great hall, having broken her fast in silence while observing the companions' morning preparations. Ayala appeared to be nothing more than a traveling hunter, her leather armor well worn by long journeys through dangerous territory, her bow and quiver marking her as one of those hardy souls who made their living in Skyrim's wilderness. But there was something about her presence that made even the bravest warriors unconsciously give her a wider berth as they passed. Perhaps it was the way she moved, with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known fear. Perhaps it was the intensity of her gaze as she studied each companion in turn, as if weighing their worth according to criteria that existed beyond normal human understanding. Or perhaps it was something deeper, something that spoke to the most primal instincts buried within Nordic blood, instincts that recognized her as something far more than she appeared to be. The other members of the circle had tried to engage her in conversation, offering the hospitality that was traditional when strangers sought shelter within Jorrvaskr's walls. Vilkas, ever the pragmatist, had questioned her about conditions on the roads, about bandits and wild animals that might threaten merchants traveling to Whiterun's markets. Farkas, with his simple and direct nature, had simply offered to share his meal, recognizing a fellow warrior regardless of the mysteries that surrounded her. But Ayala had responded to their overtures with polite distance, answering their questions with the minimum words necessary, while revealing nothing of her true purpose. She seemed content to wait, to observe, to study the companions as they went about their daily business, as if she were taking their measure according to standards that none of them could guess. The younger companions found her presence unsettling in ways they could not articulate. There was something about her that reminded them of stories told around winter fires, tales of spirits and shapeshifters who walked between the world of men and the realm of the gods. When she looked at them with those pale eyes, they felt as if she could see not just their faces but their souls, weighing their courage and their dedication on scales that had been calibrated by immortal hands. Yet for all the unease her presence generated, none could deny that she belonged among warriors. The calluses on her hands spoke of a lifetime spent gripping bow and blade. The scars that marked her arms told stories of battles fought against enemies both human and otherwise. The way she carried herself, with the confident bearing of one who had faced death and emerged victorious, commanded respect even from those who could not understand why her very presence made them think of moonlit forests and the distant howling of wolves. As the morning progressed, and the companions settled into their various duties, maintaining weapons, planning patrols, reviewing requests for aid from Skyrim's villages and holds, Alayla continued her silent observation. She seemed particularly interested in those moments when the warriors displayed not just their martial skills, but their character. She watched as Kodlak settled a dispute between two young members with patient wisdom. She observed as Vilkas took time to properly instruct a newest recruit in the finer points of sword technique. She noted how Farkas shared his breakfast with a street child who had wandered too close to the training grounds. Each act of honor, each display of the principles that defined the companions, seemed to satisfy some internal criteria that she was applying. By midday, when the sun had burned away the morning frost and warmed the training yard to comfortable temperatures, it had become clear that her evaluation was nearly complete. The question that remained was what conclusion she had reached. As the sun reached its zenith above Jorrvaskr's ancient halls, Alayla finally broke the silence that had shrouded her presence since dawn. She approached Kodlak with the measured steps of one who had reached a momentous decision, her pale eyes reflecting depths of knowledge that seemed to stretch back through centuries of forgotten lore. The Harbinger sensed her approach before she spoke, turning from his contemplation of a weathered map that showed the trade routes his warriors protected throughout Skyrim's holds. "Harbinger Whitemane," she said, her voice carrying the subtle authority of one accustomed to being obeyed without question. "The time has come for us to speak of why I have sought you out. The words I bring are not meant for all ears, but only for those who have proven themselves worthy of the deepest secrets that dwell within the heart of the hunt." Kodlak studied her face, noting the way shadows seemed to gather around her, despite the brightness of the midday sun streaming through the hall's windows. There was something about her presence that reminded him of the ancient stories his grandmother had whispered during the long winter nights of his childhood. Tales of spirits who could take human form when the need arose, of beings who served powers far older than the kingdoms of men. "Then speak," he replied simply, gesturing toward the private chamber where the circle conducted their most sensitive discussions. "But know that the companions have always faced truth. Whether it brings comfort or challenge, we do not shy away from difficult knowledge, regardless of its source." The chamber they entered was smaller than the Great Hall, its walls lined with weapons and armor that had belonged to legendary companions of ages past. Here, beneath the watchful eyes of carved totems that depicted the ancient Nordic pantheon, the most important decisions affecting the Brotherhood were made. Adela moved to the center of the room and stood silent for a long moment, as if gathering her thoughts or perhaps seeking permission from unseen forces. "I come to you as a messenger," she began, her words measured and deliberate. "There are powers in this world that extend beyond the understanding of mortal men, ancient forces that have watched the rise and fall of kingdoms with the patience of eternal beings. Some of these powers have taken notice of the companions, of your dedication to honor, your willingness to sacrifice for the protection of the innocent." Kodlak felt a chill run down his spine, though whether from fear or anticipation he could not say. The prophetic dreams that had haunted his recent nights suddenly took on new significance. The images of wolves running alongside his warriors, no longer seeming like mere products of an overactive imagination. "You speak of the Daedra," he said, his voice steady despite the implications of such contact. The companions had always maintained a careful distance from the Daedric princes, recognizing their power while remaining wary of their motivations. Which of the Lords of Oblivion seeks audience with mortal warriors? Hircine, Aela replied, and at the mention of that name, the very air in the chamber seemed to grow thick with anticipation. The huntsman, the father of man-beasts, the prince who governs the eternal chase that drives all predators. He has observed your brotherhood for many years, watching as you have proven yourselves worthy of his attention through countless acts of courage and skill. The Harbinger's mind raced as he considered the implications of her words. Hircine was known to him through the old stories, the Daedric prince whose realm encompassed not just the physical act of hunting, but the spiritual essence of the pursuit itself. Unlike some of his darker siblings among the princes, Hircine was not typically associated with outright malevolence, but his gifts always came with transformations that forever changed those who accepted them. What does the huntsman offer to the companions? Kodlak asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. The dreams of wolves, the sense of destiny that had been building within the halls of Jorrvaskr, all pointed toward a single inevitable conclusion. Power, Allah said simply, the strength to transcend the limitations of mortal flesh, to become something greater than human while retaining the honor and wisdom that define your brotherhood. But this gift is not offered lightly, nor is it extended to all. Only those who have proven themselves worthy through trial and dedication will be given the opportunity to embrace the beast that sleeps within Nordic blood. She moved closer to where Kodlak stood, and for a moment he could have sworn he saw something wild and predatory flicker behind her eyes, something that spoke of moonlit hunts and the primal joy of the chase. The ritual is ancient, older than the kingdoms of men, older perhaps than the civilizations that rose and fell before the first Nord set foot upon Tamriel's shores. It connects those who undergo it to the very essence of the hunt, to the spiritual force that drives all predators in their pursuit of prey. And what would this transformation entail? The Harbinger asked, though he suspected that the answer would challenge everything he thought he knew about the nature of humanity itself. Lycanthropy, Aela replied, the word hanging in the air between them like a blade suspended above their heads, but not the crude curse that afflicts common werewolves, not the mindless savagery that transforms men into beasts. This is the pure gift of Hircine himself, lycanthropy, as it was meant to be, a perfect fusion of human intelligence and lupine strength. Kodlak felt the weight of destiny settling upon his shoulders like a heavy cloak. He had always known that leadership of the companions would eventually require him to make decisions that would affect not just his own life, but the lives of all who called Jorrvaskr home. But he had never imagined that such a choice would involve fundamental questions about the nature of humanity itself. The decision is not yours alone to make, Aela continued, as if reading his thoughts. The gift will be offered only to those who volunteer, only to those who understand fully what they are accepting. But know this, Harbinger, the time is coming when Skyrim will face threats that cannot be defeated by mortal strength alone. The companions will need every advantage they can gain if they are to fulfill their oath to protect this land and its people. She paused, allowing her words to sink in before delivering what Kodlak sensed would be her final revelation. The ritual can only be performed during the full moon, when the barrier between the mortal world and Hircine's realm grows thin. Tomorrow night, when Luna rises silver and full above Skyrim's peaks, those who would accept the gift must make their choice. After that, the opportunity will not come again for many years. With those words hanging in the air, like an unbreakable pronouncement of fate, Aela fell silent, leaving Kodlak alone with the most momentous decision of his long life as harbinger of the companions. The remainder of that day passed with an unusual tension permeating the halls of Jorrvaskr, as if the very stones of the ancient building sensed the momentous choice that loomed before its inhabitants. Kodlak moved through his duties with mechanical precision, settling disputes between young warriors, reviewing requests for aid from distant holds, and maintaining the countless small routines that kept the Brotherhood functioning. Yet his mind remained focused on the conversation with Ella, on the implications of her offer, and on the weight of responsibility that had settled upon his shoulders. As evening approached, and the companions gathered for their traditional meal, the Harbinger found himself studying the faces of his shield brothers with new eyes. These were men and women who had dedicated their lives to the service of honor, who had sworn oaths to protect Skyrim and its people regardless of the personal cost. They laughed and joked as they shared their bread and mead, recounting tales of recent adventures and planning future expeditions, unaware that their Harbinger wrestled with a decision that could fundamentally alter the nature of their brotherhood. Vilkas sat at his usual place near the head of the great table, his stern features relaxed in one of his rare moments of genuine enjoyment as he listened to Farkas recount an absurdly exaggerated version of their recent encounter with a giant near Riften. The twin brothers represented the heart of what the companions had always been, warriors whose dedication to their calling was matched only by their loyalty to their shield brothers. Would they understand the necessity of accepting Hircine's gift, or would they see it as a betrayal of everything they had sworn to uphold? Near the center of the table, Nejada Stonearm engaged in animated conversation with Rhea, the newest member of the circle, sharing wisdom gained through years of battles fought in defense of the innocent. Their voices carried the easy camaraderie of warriors who had faced death together and emerged stronger for the experience. These women had proven themselves worthy of the companions' trust through courage and skill, but how would they react to the revelation that their path forward might require embracing aspects of themselves that went far beyond normal human experience? Athis and Torvar occupied seats closer to the great hearth, their weathered faces reflecting the firelight as they discussed the finer points of combat technique with the passionate intensity that marked all true warriors. They had survived countless battles, had seen friends fall and enemies triumph, had learned the hard lessons that came with a life dedicated to the sword. Their experience and wisdom would be invaluable in the trials that lay ahead, but would they have the courage to accept a transformation that would change them in ways that no amount of training could prepare them for? Even the younger members of the Brotherhood, those who had not yet earned full membership in the circle, seemed to sense that something significant was approaching. They spoke in quieter tones than usual, casting occasional glances toward the head table where their leaders sat in uncharacteristic silence. Alessa remained among them, having accepted the companions' traditional hospitality, but her presence continued to generate an undercurrent of unease that affected even those who could not articulate why her very existence made them think of wild places and primal forces. As the meal progressed, and the level of mead in the great barrels diminished, Kodlak found himself remembering the early days of his own membership in the Brotherhood. He had been young then, barely old enough to lift a proper sword, when he had first walked through Jorrvaskr's doors seeking acceptance among the legendary warriors of Skyrim. The harbinger of that time, a grizzled veteran named Asker the Bold, had seen something in the eager young Nord that warranted investment, had taken the time to teach him not just the techniques of combat, but the deeper principles that defined what it meant to be a companion. Those lessons had shaped everything Kodlak had become, had guided him through decades of service until he had eventually earned the right to lead the Brotherhood himself. The weight of that legacy pressed upon him now as he contemplated a decision that would affect not just his own fate, but the destiny of every warrior who called Jorrvaskr home. How could he reconcile his oath to preserve the traditions of the companions with the growing certainty that those traditions alone would not be sufficient for the challenges that lay ahead? The answer came to him gradually, emerging from the depths of memory where the oldest teachings of the Brotherhood resided. The companions had never been a static organization, content to rest upon the achievements of their predecessors. From the very beginning, from the time of Ysgramor himself, they had adapted to meet the needs of their time, had embraced new methods and new allies when necessity demanded such flexibility. The legendary founder had not hesitated to accept aid from the gods themselves when the survival of the Nordic people hung in the balance. Perhaps the current situation required similar courage, similar willingness to embrace change in service of a greater good. As the evening progressed and the younger members of the Brotherhood began to retire to their chambers, Kodlak made his decision. Rising from his place at the head table, he caught the attention of the circle's senior members with a gesture that had become familiar over his years of leadership. Vilkas and Farkas, Najada and Ria, Athis and Torvar, all turned their attention to their harbinger, recognizing the gravity in his expression even before he spoke. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying the weight of authority that had guided the companions through countless trials. "There are matters we must discuss in private, matters that concern the future of our brotherhood and the oaths we have sworn to protect Skyrim and its people. What I am about to share with you will challenge everything you think you know about the nature of strength, about the price of honor, about the sacrifices that true warriors must sometimes make." He gestured toward Ayala, who had been observing the evening's proceedings with the patient attention of one who understood that momentous decisions required time to properly develop. "Our guest brings an offer from powers beyond the mortal world, an opportunity to transcend the limitations that have always constrained human warriors. But this gift comes with a price, and that price includes fundamental changes to what we are, changes that cannot be undone once they are accepted." The members of the circle exchanged glances, each recognizing that they stood at a crossroads whose outcome would echo through generations yet unborn. They had followed Kodlak's leadership through countless battles, had trusted his judgment in matters of life and death, had sworn oaths of loyalty that bound them to his cause regardless of personal cost. Now, as they prepared to hear details of an offer that would test those bonds in ways they could not yet imagine, they prepared to face perhaps the greatest challenge of their lives as companions. The time for half measures and comfortable traditions had passed. Tomorrow night, beneath the light of the full moon, some among them would choose to embrace a destiny that would forever separate them from the purely human world they had always known. The private council chamber fell into absolute silence as Kodlak's words settled over the assembled members of the circle like snow covering a battlefield after the last sword had been sheathed. The weight of his revelation hung in the air between them, and for a long moment none dared to break the quiet that had descended upon the ancient room. The flickering light from the braziers cast dancing shadows across their faces, creating an atmosphere that seemed fitting for discussions of matters that existed beyond the normal boundaries of human experience. It was Vilkas who finally found his voice, his usual stern demeanor giving way to something approaching bewilderment. "Harbinger," he said slowly, each word carefully measured as he struggled to process what he had heard. "Are you saying that this woman brings an offer of lycanthropy, that she expects us to willingly accept transformation into the very beasts we have spent our lives learning to combat?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, though Kodlak recognized that it came not from hostility, but from the natural confusion of a warrior whose entire worldview had just been challenged. Vilkas had dedicated his life to perfecting the arts of combat, to honing his body and mind into the perfect instrument of warfare. The suggestion that such dedication might be insufficient, that greater power required abandoning humanity itself, struck at the very core of everything he had believed about strength and honor. "I am saying," Kodlak replied with the patient tone he had perfected over decades of leadership, "that we face a choice between accepting help from sources we have never before considered or potentially failing in our oath to protect Skyrim when threats arise that exceed our current capabilities. The gift Adala offers is not the mindless curse that afflicts common lycanthropes. It is something far more refined, far more controlled." Farkas shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his simpler nature allowing him to grasp the essential elements of the situation without becoming mired in philosophical complications. "But why us?" he asked, his deep voice reflecting genuine puzzlement. Why would this Hircine choose the companions for such a gift? We have never sought power from the Daedric princes. We have always relied on our own strength, our own courage. Alela spoke for the first time since the council had convened, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of one who had witnessed truths that existed beyond mortal comprehension. Because you have proven yourselves worthy through generations of honorable service. Because your dedication to protecting the innocent has caught the attention of forces that value such commitment. Because when the time comes for Skyrim to face its greatest trials, the land will need protectors who combine human wisdom with something more than human strength. She rose from her seat and moved to stand before the great map that dominated one wall of the chamber, her fingers tracing the boundaries of Skyrim's various holds as she continued. The gift I offer has been given only rarely throughout history, and only to those whose hearts burn with the purest dedication to the hunt, to the protection of their people. It is not lycanthropy as the common people understand it, not a curse that strips away reason and leaves only savage hunger. It is a perfect fusion of human intelligence and lupine instinct, a transformation that enhances rather than diminishes everything that makes you who you are. Najada Stonearm leaned forward, her weathered hands clasped tightly before her as she studied Ayala's face for any sign of deception. And what would be required of us in return? The Daedric princes are not known for their generosity. What price would Hircine demand for such a gift? Service, Ayala replied simply. Continued dedication to the ideals that have already defined your lives as companions. The hunt never ends. The need for protectors never diminishes. Those who accept the gift will find themselves bound not just to Skyrim, but to the eternal chase that drives all predators in their pursuit of prey. You will become Hircine's hounds in the mortal world, his instruments for maintaining the balance between civilization and the wild. Rhea, the youngest member of the circle, had been listening in fascination rather than fear, her eyes bright with the curiosity that had always marked her as exceptional among the companions. What would the transformation actually involve? She asked, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of the question. What would we become, and how would it change our ability to serve the Brotherhood? The question seemed to please Ayala, as if she had been waiting for someone to move beyond fear and uncertainty to practical considerations. The ritual itself is ancient, dating back to the earliest days when the boundary between the mortal world and the realm of spirits was less firmly established. It requires the willing participation of the candidate, a sacred grove where the barriers between worlds grow thin, and the blessing of Hircine himself during the full moon. She paused, allowing her words to settle before continuing with details that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. Those who undergo the transformation retain their human appearance and intelligence at all times except when they choose to embrace their lupine nature. In wolf form, they possess strength and speed far beyond anything achievable by mortal warriors, along with enhanced senses that allow them to track enemies across vast distances and detect threats that would remain hidden from normal perception. Jorrvaskr, who had remained silent throughout most of the discussion, finally spoke up with the practical concerns of a veteran warrior. And the risks. Surely such power comes with dangers that we should understand before making any commitments. The greatest risk, Ayala acknowledged, lies in maintaining the balance between human and beast. Those who embrace the wolf must never allow the primal instincts to completely overwhelm their rational minds. The gift enhances what you already are, but it also awakens aspects of your nature that have slumbered since the earliest days of Nordic civilization. Learning to control these impulses, to direct them in service of honor rather than mere hunger, requires discipline and wisdom. Aethes had been studying the assembled group throughout the discussion, his tactical mind already working through the implications of having lycanthropes among the companions' ranks. How many would be chosen, he asked. Would this be something offered to the entire Brotherhood, or only to select members? The ritual can only be performed for a few individuals during each full moon, Aela explained. Hircine's blessing is not infinite, and the transformation requires tremendous spiritual energy to complete successfully. Tonight, no more than 5 or 6 could undergo the change, and they would need to be the strongest, the most dedicated, the most capable of maintaining their humanity while embracing their bestial nature. The implications of her words settled over the assembled companions like a heavy blanket. They were being asked not just to consider accepting lycanthropy for themselves, but to choose which among their number would be selected for transformation. The decision would create divisions within the brotherhood, separating those who embraced the gift from those who remained purely human. Kodlak recognized the thoughts that were passing through their minds, the same concerns that had troubled him since his conversation with Aela earlier that day. "I will not command any of you to accept this gift," he said firmly. "The choice must be made freely, with full understanding of what is being offered and what will be required in return. But I also will not pretend that we can ignore this opportunity simply because it challenges our preconceptions about the nature of strength and honor." He rose from his seat and moved to stand before the great hearth where the fire had burned low during their lengthy discussion. "Tomorrow night, when the moon rises full above Skyrim's peaks, those who choose to undergo the transformation will travel to the sacred grove that Alea has prepared. The rest will remain here, continuing to serve the companions according to the traditions that have guided us for generations. Both paths lead to the same destination, the protection of Skyrim and its people, but they require different sacrifices and offer different rewards." The chamber fell silent once more, as each member of the circle contemplated a decision that would fundamentally alter not just their own lives, but the entire future of the brotherhood they had sworn to serve. The hours that followed the council meeting passed with agonizing slowness, as if time itself had been affected by the weight of the decision that hung over Jorrvaskr's ancient halls. The members of the circle dispersed to their private chambers, each wrestling with thoughts and emotions that defied easy categorization. Some paced restlessly through the corridors, their footsteps echoing off stone walls that had witnessed countless generations of warriors facing impossible choices. Others sat in silent meditation, seeking guidance from gods and ancestors whose voices seemed frustratingly distant in this moment of greatest need. Kodlak found himself drawn to the chamber where the Brotherhood kept its most sacred artifacts, relics that connected the modern companions to their legendary origins. Here, beneath the watchful gaze of Jorrvaskr own battle axe and the tattered banners that had flown over victorious battlefields throughout Skyrim's history, he sought the wisdom of those who had led the companions through previous crises. The ancient weapons seemed to pulse with memories of their wielders, reminding him that leadership had always required making decisions that others could not or would not make. The sword of Jeek of the River, the shield of Henantier the Outsider, the bow of Clue the Racked. Each artifact told a story of sacrifice and dedication that stretched back through centuries of service. These legendary companions had faced their own impossible choices, had made decisions that altered the course of history while remaining true to the principles that defined their brotherhood. Their example provided comfort, but not answers, for the current situation lay beyond anything they had ever encountered. In another part of the Great Hall, Vilkas sat alone at the table where the circle had shared countless meals, his weathered hands wrapped around a horn of mead that had grown warm and flat, while his thoughts wandered through labyrinths of doubt and possibility. His entire identity had been built around the pursuit of martial perfection, around the belief that discipline and training could overcome any obstacle. The suggestion that such dedication might be insufficient, that greater challenges required abandoning the purely human aspects of his nature, struck at the very foundation of everything he had believed about strength and honor. Yet he could not deny the logic of Aela's arguments, could not ignore the growing certainty that Skyrim faced threats which conventional warfare might prove inadequate to address. The dragons that had recently returned to the world, the civil war that was tearing the province apart, the whispered rumors of darker powers stirring in the shadowed corners of Tamriel, all suggested that the comfortable certainties of the past were crumbling beneath the weight of a changing world. Farkas had chosen a different approach to processing the evening's revelations, making his way to the training yard, where moonlight painted the ancient stones with silver radiance. Here, surrounded by the targets and practiced dummies that had shaped generations of warriors, he moved through the familiar forms of swordwork that had always brought him peace. The rhythm of blade cutting through air, the precise movements that had been burned into his muscle memory through years of repetition, provided an anchor of normalcy in a night that had challenged everything he thought he knew about the nature of strength. As he practiced, his simple but profound understanding of the situation gradually crystallized into clarity. The companions existed to protect people who could not protect themselves, to stand between the innocent and those who would do them harm. If accepting Hircine's gift would make them better able to fulfill that sacred obligation, then the philosophical implications mattered less than the practical results. The people of Skyrim did not care whether their protectors were purely human or something more. They only cared that those protectors possessed the strength and courage necessary to keep them safe. In her own chamber, Ayala sat in perfect stillness, her pale eyes reflecting the moonlight that streamed through the narrow window as she communed with forces that existed beyond the normal boundaries of mortal perception. The ritual she had described to the companions was not merely a ceremony, but a sacred pact that would bind those who accepted it to powers and responsibilities that stretched across dimensions. She could feel Hircine's presence in the silver light, could sense his approval of the warriors she had chosen to approach with his gift. The Daedric Prince of the Hunt had been observing the companions for many years, watching as they proved themselves worthy of his attention through countless acts of courage and honor. Their dedication to protecting the innocent, their willingness to sacrifice personal gain for the greater good, their adherence to principles that elevated them above mere selves, words, and mercenaries, all of these qualities had marked them as potential servants worthy of his blessing. But the gift could not be forced upon unwilling recipients, could not be granted to those who lacked the spiritual strength to maintain the delicate balance between human wisdom and bestial instinct. The transformation required not just physical courage, but the kind of moral certainty that would allow the recipient to embrace their dual nature without losing themselves to either extreme. Throughout the hall, other members of the Brotherhood sensed that momentous events were approaching, even if they did not understand the specific nature of the choice their leaders faced. The younger warriors gathered in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about the strange tension that had pervaded Jorrvaskr since the mysterious visitor's arrival. They noticed the way their superiors moved with unusual gravity, the way conversations stopped when they approached, the way the very air seemed charged with anticipation and uncertainty. Some of the more perceptive among them recognized that they stood at a crossroads, that the decisions made in the coming hours would fundamentally alter the character of the organization they had sworn to serve. They prepared themselves mentally for whatever changes might come, trusting in the wisdom of their leaders, while secretly hoping that they would prove worthy of whatever trials lay ahead. As the night deepened and the moon climbed higher in the star-filled sky, the members of the circle began to reach their individual conclusions about the offer that had been placed before them. Each came to their decision through different paths of reasoning, but all were guided by the same fundamental principle that had always defined the companions: the willingness to sacrifice personal comfort and safety for the protection of those who could not protect themselves. Najada Stonearm was among the first to find certainty, her practical nature cutting through philosophical complexities to focus on essential truths. If lycanthropy would make her a more effective protector of Skyrim's people, then accepting the transformation was simply another form of training, no different in principle from the years she had spent perfecting her skills with sword and shield. The method might be unusual, but the goal remained the same. Rhea approached the decision from a different angle. her younger perspective allowing her to embrace change more readily than her senior colleagues. She had joined the companions seeking adventure and the chance to make a meaningful difference in the world, and the opportunity to become something beyond ordinary human limitations appealed to the part of her that had always yearned for experiences that existed beyond the boundaries of normal existence. Atis and Torvar, veterans of countless battles who had seen the limitations of purely mortal strength tested time and again, found themselves drawn to the practical advantages that lycanthropy would provide. They had both witnessed situations where greater physical capabilities might have saved lives, where the difference between success and failure had come down to factors beyond their control. The chance to transcend those limitations, to become the kind of protectors that Skyrim truly needed, outweighed their concerns about the spiritual implications of the transformation. As dawn approached and the first hints of light began to creep across the eastern horizon, the members of the Circle prepared to reconvene and share the conclusions they had reached during their long night of contemplation. The decision that awaited them would echo through generations of companions yet unborn, would fundamentally alter the nature of the Brotherhood while preserving its essential purpose. The ancient pact between the companions and the forces they served was about to be renewed and redefined in ways that none of them could fully anticipate. The pale light of dawn had barely begun to filter through Jorrvaskr's ancient windows when the members of the Circle reconvened in the private chamber where their world had been irrevocably altered just hours before. The exhaustion of a sleepless night showed in their faces, but beneath the weariness lay a steely determination that spoke of decisions reached through careful contemplation rather than hasty emotion. Each warrior had spent the dark hours wrestling with questions that challenged everything they had believed about the nature of strength, honor, and service, and now they gathered to share the conclusions that would reshape the destiny of their brotherhood. Kodlak took his customary place at the head of the simple wooden table, his weathered features reflecting the weight of responsibility that had guided him through decades of leadership. The morning light revealed lines of worry and wisdom etched deeply into his face, testimonies to the countless difficult decisions he had made in service of the companions and the people of Skyrim. This choice, however, would eclipse all others in its significance and its consequences for generations yet unborn. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying the measured cadence that had become familiar to all who served under his guidance. "We have each spent the night in contemplation of matters that extend far beyond our normal experience. The choice before us is not one that can be made lightly, nor one that can be undone once the path is chosen. I ask each of you to speak freely of the conclusions you have reached, so that we may face this decision with the collective wisdom that has always been our greatest strength." The silence that followed his words stretched for several heartbeats, as if each member of the Circle was reluctant to be the first to voice thoughts that would make their transformation from possibility to inevitability. It was Nida Stonearm who finally broke the quiet, her practical nature cutting through hesitation with characteristic directness. "I have served the companions for most of my adult life," she said, her scarred hands folded before her on the worn wooden surface. "In all that time, I have seen us face enemies that tested the limits of what mortal warriors can accomplish. We have prevailed through courage and skill, and the strength that comes from fighting for something greater than ourselves. But I have also seen situations where those qualities, however pure, were not enough to prevent tragedy." She paused, her eyes moving around the table to meet the gaze of each of her shield brothers in turn. "If accepting Hircine's gift will make us more capable of protecting the innocent, of standing between Skyrim's people and the forces that would do them harm, then I believe we have an obligation to embrace that opportunity. The method may be unconventional, but our purpose remains unchanged." Her words seemed to release something that had been held in check among the assembled warriors, and Farkas nodded slowly in agreement. "The people we protect do not care whether we are purely human or something more," he added, his simple wisdom cutting to the heart of the matter. They only care that we have the strength to keep them safe and the honor to use that strength in their service rather than our own. Vilkas had been listening with the intense concentration that marked all his deliberations, his analytical mind working through the implications of his colleagues' statements. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of reluctant acceptance that suggested his own internal struggle had been particularly difficult. "I confess that part of me rebels against the idea of seeking power from sources beyond our own training and discipline," he said, his stern features reflecting the conflict between his natural inclinations and his rational understanding of their situation. "But I cannot deny the logic of the arguments that have been presented, nor can I ignore the growing certainty that Skyrim faces challenges which conventional strength may prove inadequate to address." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the ancient weapons that lined the chamber's walls as he continued. "If our predecessors could see us now, if Jorrvaskr himself could witness this discussion, I believe he would approve of our willingness to adapt in service of our people." The legendary founder did not hesitate to accept aid from the gods when the survival of the Nordic people hung in the balance. "Perhaps our situation requires similar courage." Rhea had been following the discussion with the eager attention of youth, combined with the wisdom that had earned her a place among the circle despite her relative inexperience. Her perspective, unburdened by decades of established thinking, allowed her to embrace possibilities that her senior colleagues found more difficult to accept. "I joined the companions, seeking the chance to make a meaningful difference in the world," she said, her voice carrying the conviction that had always marked her as exceptional among the Brotherhood's younger members. "The opportunity to become something beyond ordinary human limitations, to serve as a bridge between the mortal world and the realm of spirits, represents exactly the kind of adventure I hoped to find when I first walked through Jorrvaskr's doors." Athis and Torvar exchanged glances before the former spoke for both of them, his tactical mind having worked through all the practical implications of their decision during the long night of contemplation. "We have both seen too many situations where greater physical capabilities might have saved lives, where the difference between success and failure came down to factors beyond our control. The chance to transcend those limitations, to become the kind of protectors that Skyrim truly needs, outweighs our concerns about the philosophical implications." Adela had remained silent throughout their discussion, respecting their need to reach their own conclusions without external pressure, but now she leaned forward with obvious satisfaction at the consensus that was emerging. "You honor both yourselves and the Daedric prince who offers his gift through your willingness to embrace this transformation in service of others rather than personal gain," she said, her pale eyes reflecting depths of approval that seemed to come from sources beyond her individual judgment. "The ritual itself will take place tonight, in a sacred grove that lies deep within the forests east of Whiterun," she continued, her voice taking on the formal cadence of one reciting ancient instructions. "The location has been prepared according to traditions that stretch back to the earliest days of Nordic civilization, when the boundary between the mortal world and the realm of spirits was less firmly established than it is today." She rose from her seat and moved to the great map that dominated one wall of the chamber, her finger tracing a path that led from the city into the wilderness beyond. "We will need to depart before sunset, allowing enough time to reach the grove and complete the preliminary preparations before the moon reaches its zenith. The transformation requires not just Hircine's blessing, but the willing participation of each candidate and their absolute commitment to maintaining the balance between human wisdom and lupine instinct." Kodlak felt the weight of destiny settling upon his shoulders as he contemplated the magnitude of what they were about to undertake. The decision to accept lycanthropy would not just affect those who underwent the transformation, but would fundamentally alter the character of the companions for generations to come. Future members of the Brotherhood would be inducted into an organization that existed partially beyond the purely human world, that maintained connections to powers and responsibilities that stretched across dimensions. "There is one more matter we must address," he said, his voice carrying the gravity of a leader who understood the full implications of their choice. "Not all members of the Brotherhood will undergo this transformation, nor should they. The companions have always drawn their strength from diversity, from the different perspectives and capabilities that each warrior brings to our common cause. Those who remain purely human will continue to serve an essential role, maintaining our connections to the mortal world while their transformed shield brothers explore new realms of possibility." The truth of his words was evident to all present, though none spoke of the potential for division that such arrangement might create. The bonds of brotherhood that had always held the companions together would be tested in new ways as those who accepted Hircine's gift learned to balance their dual nature, while those who remained unchanged adapted to serving alongside warriors who were no longer entirely human. "The ritual can accommodate no more than 6 individuals during tonight's ceremony," Ayala added, providing the practical constraints that would govern their decision. "Those chosen must be the strongest, the most disciplined, the most capable of maintaining their humanity while embracing their bestial nature. The transformation is irreversible, and those who undergo it will carry the responsibility for proving that lycanthropy can serve honor rather than merely satisfy hunger." As the morning sun climbed higher in the sky outside Jorrvaskr's windows, the members of the circle began the process of determining which among them would accept the gift that Hircine offered. The decision would create the first generation of what would become known as the Inner Circle, warriors who served as living bridges between the mortal world and realms that existed beyond normal human understanding. The ancient pact between the companions and the forces they served was about to be renewed in ways that would echo through the ages, fundamentally altering the nature of Nordic heroism, while preserving its essential dedication to protecting those who could not protect themselves. The sacred grove lay hidden deep within the ancient forests that stretched eastward from Whiterun, in a place where the trees grew so thick that even midday sun struggled to penetrate the canopy of leaves that had witnessed centuries of Nordic history. Here, where the roots of massive pines intertwined with standing stones carved by hands long forgotten, the boundary between the mortal world and the realm of spirits had always been thinner than elsewhere. The very air seemed to hum with energies that predated human civilization, with forces that connected the physical world to dimensions where gods and Daedric princes held dominion over concepts that transcended normal understanding. Abdila had led the chosen members of the circle through winding paths that seemed to exist only when she walked upon them, routes that twisted through the wilderness in ways that defied conventional navigation. The journey itself had served as a form of preparation, gradually separating those who would undergo transformation from the familiar world of Jorrvaskr and human civilization. With each step deeper into the forest, the connection to their purely mortal existence had grown more tenuous, replaced by an awareness of older truths that slumbered in Nordic blood. The 6 companions who had been selected for the ritual moved in reverent silence behind their guide, each lost in private contemplation of what awaited them in the grove ahead. Kodlak walked with the measured pace of a leader who understood that he was guiding his followers not just to a new location, but to a fundamentally different form of existence. The weight of responsibility that had always defined his role as harbinger felt even heavier now, as he contemplated the irreversible changes that would soon transform him and his chosen shield brothers into something beyond purely human limitations. Vilkas maintained his customary stern demeanor, but those who knew him well could detect subtle signs of the internal struggle he continued to wage between his rational acceptance of necessity and his instinctive resistance to seeking power from supernatural sources. His entire identity had been built around the pursuit of martial perfection through discipline and training, and the suggestion that such dedication required supplementation with Daedric gifts challenged his most fundamental beliefs about the nature of strength and honor. Farkas walked beside his twin brother with a quiet confidence that had always marked him as exceptional among the companions, his simpler nature allowing him to embrace the coming transformation without the philosophical complications that troubled others. He understood the essential truth that lay beneath all the complex discussions of the previous night. They were accepting this gift not for personal gain, but to better serve the people who depended upon their protection. Najada Stonearm moved through the forest with the practical efficiency that had defined her entire approach to life as a companion, her weathered features reflecting neither fear nor anticipation, but simply the calm acceptance of a warrior who had made her decision and would not waste energy second-guessing herself. She had seen too many situations where greater strength might have prevented tragedy, and the opportunity to transcend mortal limitations in service of others represented exactly the kind of sacrifice that her oath demanded. Rhea followed the group with barely contained excitement, her younger perspective allowing her to view the coming transformation as the ultimate adventure rather than a necessary burden. The prospect of becoming something beyond ordinary human experience, of serving as a bridge between the mortal world and realms that few people ever glimpsed, appealed to the part of her that had always yearned for challenges that existed beyond conventional boundaries. This brought up the rear of their small procession, his tactical mind continuing to work through all the implications of what they were about to undertake, even as his feet carried him steadily deeper into the ancient forest. He understood better than most the strategic advantages that lycanthropy would provide, the enhanced capabilities that would allow them to face threats that had previously been beyond their ability to address effectively. As they walked, the forest around them began to change in subtle ways that suggested they were approaching something significant. The trees grew larger and more ancient, their massive trunks bearing scars that spoke of battles fought in ages past between forces that wielded powers beyond mortal comprehension. Strange symbols carved into bark and stone caught the eye at irregular intervals, runic inscriptions that predated written Nordic history and seemed to pulse with their own inner light as the sun continued its journey toward the western horizon. The air itself grew thick with anticipation, charged with energies that made the hair on their arms stand upright and filled their mouths with the metallic taste of approaching lightning. Even the wildlife seemed to sense that momentous events were approaching as birds fell silent in the canopy above and small creatures scurried away from paths that led toward the sacred grove. When they finally emerged into the clearing that Ayala had prepared for the ritual, the chosen companions found themselves in a space that seemed to exist partially outside normal reality. The grove was roughly circular, perhaps 50 paces across, surrounded by standing stones that rose from the earth like the fingers of buried giants. Each monolith bore inscriptions in a language that none of them could read, but all of them somehow understood, words that spoke of ancient pacts between mortal warriors and immortal hunters, of oaths sworn under starlight that bound souls across the barriers between worlds. At the center of the clearing stood an altar carved from a single piece of black stone, its surface polished smooth by centuries of use in ceremonies that connected the physical world to realms where Daedric princes held dominion over concepts that transcended human understanding. The altar's surface bore stains that might have been blood or might have been something else entirely, dark marks that seemed to shift and flow even as they watched. Above the grove, the sky had begun to take on the deep blue of approaching evening, though the thick canopy made it difficult to judge exactly how much time remained before moonrise. The air grew colder as shadows lengthened, and the strange energies that permeated the clearing intensified until they could feel them pressing against their skin like invisible hands. Asila moved to stand beside the altar, her movements taking on a ritual precision that suggested she had performed this ceremony many times before in service of the huntsman who had chosen her as his mortal agent. Her pale eyes reflected the last rays of sunlight filtering through the leaves, but there was something else in them now, something that spoke of connections to powers that existed beyond the normal boundaries of human experience. The transformation you are about to undergo is older than the kingdoms of men, she began, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to come from sources beyond her individual throat. It connects those who accept it to the very essence of the hunt, to the spiritual force that drives all predators in their eternal pursuit of prey. But this gift is not granted lightly, nor can it be reversed once the ritual is complete. She gestured to the standing stones that surrounded them, and the companions noticed for the first time that the runic inscriptions seemed to be moving, shifting, and changing in patterns that hurt their eyes when they tried to focus on them directly. Each of you must understand that you are about to become something more than human, but also something that exists partially outside the mortal world you have always known. The balance between your human consciousness and your lupine instincts will require constant vigilance, constant dedication to the principles that have always defined your service. The moon began to rise above the eastern edge of the forest, its silver light filtering through the canopy to illuminate the grove with an ethereal radiance that seemed to awaken the ancient powers that slumbered in the carved stones. As the lunar rays touched the altar at the center of the clearing, the dark stains on its surface began to glow with a light that was not quite red and not quite purple, but something that existed between those colors in a spectrum that mortal eyes were not designed to perceive. Kodlak felt the presence of Hircine settling over the grove like an invisible cloak, a consciousness so vast and alien that his human mind could only comprehend fragments of its true nature. The Daedric Prince of the Hunt was here, not in physical form, but in spiritual essence, ready to bestow his gift upon those who had proven themselves worthy through generations of honorable service. The ritual requires the willing participation of each candidate, Aela continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with frequencies beyond normal hearing. You must approach the altar one by one, place your hands upon its surface, and speak aloud your commitment to serving the eternal hunt while maintaining the honor that has always defined your brotherhood. The transformation that awaited them would fundamentally alter not just their physical capabilities, but their spiritual connection to forces that governed the balance between civilization and wilderness, between human wisdom and primal instinct. They were about to become living bridges between worlds, warriors whose dual nature would allow them to serve as protectors of both mortal and immortal realms. As the moon climbed higher in the star-filled sky, and its light grew stronger within the sacred grove, the ancient powers that had slumbered for generations began to stir, ready to welcome new servants into the eternal hunt that had no beginning and would have no end. The moonlight that filled the sacred grove seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beating of their hearts, as if the celestial body above had synchronized itself with the life force of those who stood ready to undergo transformation. Each of the chosen companions felt the weight of destiny settling upon their shoulders like a mantle woven from starlight and shadow, understanding that they were about to cross a threshold from which there could be no return. The ancient stones that surrounded them hummed with energies that had accumulated over centuries of similar rituals, each one adding its own resonance to the symphony of power that now filled the clearing. Kodlak was the first to step forward, his role as harbinger requiring him to lead by example, even in matters that challenged every assumption he had ever held about the nature of leadership. The black altar seemed to draw him with an irresistible magnetism, its polished surface reflecting the moonlight in patterns that suggested depths far greater than the few inches of carved stone that comprised its physical form. As he placed his weathered hands upon the cool surface, he felt a jolt of connection that seemed to link him directly to forces that existed beyond the boundaries of mortal comprehension. I, Kodlak Whitemane, harbinger of the companions, accept the gift of Hircine in service of the eternal hunt, he spoke, his voice carrying across the grove with a clarity that seemed enhanced by supernatural forces. I pledge to maintain the balance between human wisdom and lupine strength, to use this power in protection of the innocent, and to honor the oaths that have always defined my brotherhood. The words had barely left his lips when the transformation began, not with the violent convulsions that marked the curse of common lycanthropy, but with a gentle warming that spread from his hands through his entire body. He felt his consciousness expanding, becoming aware of scents and sounds that had previously existed beyond human perception. The heartbeats of his companions became as distinct as individual voices. The rustle of leaves in the canopy above told stories of wind patterns and weather changes, and somewhere in the distance he could hear the howling of wolves that seemed to welcome him into their ancient brotherhood. Yet even as his senses expanded beyond mortal limitations, his human intellect remained intact, perhaps even enhanced by the connection to primal instincts that had guided predators since the dawn of time. He understood with a clarity that transcended rational thought that he had become something new while remaining essentially himself. The discipline and honor that had defined his leadership of the companions remained unchanged, but now they were supported by capabilities that would allow him to protect Skyrim in ways he had never before imagined possible. Vilkas approached the altar next, his stern features reflecting the internal struggle between acceptance and resistance that had marked his entire journey to this moment. When he placed his hands upon the stone surface, the transformation seemed to recognize his conflicted nature and proceeded with particular gentleness, as if Hircine himself understood the sacrifice that this warrior was making by accepting power from sources beyond his preferred realm of pure martial discipline. I, Vilkas of the Companions, accept this gift not for personal gain, but in service of those who cannot protect themselves, he declared, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. I will prove that lycanthropy can serve honor rather than hunger, that the beast within can be directed by human wisdom toward noble purposes. The change that flowed through him brought with it an unexpected sense of completion, as if aspects of his nature that had always existed in potential were finally being awakened to their full power. The rigid self-control that had always marked his approach to combat was enhanced rather than compromised by the primal instincts that now stirred within his blood. He realized, with something approaching wonder, that the wolf spirit did not threaten his humanity, but rather provided new tools for expressing the protective instincts that had always driven his service to the companions. Farkas followed his twin brother to the altar, with the quiet confidence that had always characterized his approach to life's challenges. His simpler nature seemed to make the transformation easier, as if his lack of internal conflict allowed the lycanthropic gifts to integrate more smoothly with his existing personality. When he spoke his acceptance of Hircine's blessing, his words carried the straightforward sincerity that had always marked him as one of the most trustworthy among the companions. I accept this power to better serve my shield brothers and the people who depend upon our protection, he said, his deep voice resonating with conviction. The wolf runs with the pack, and the companions are my pack. This strength will make us all more capable of fulfilling our oaths. The transformation that flowed through him seemed to recognize his uncomplicated dedication and proceeded with particular smoothness, integrating the bestial aspects of his new nature with the loyal simplicity that had always defined his character. He felt his connection to his companions deepening, the pack bonds that lycanthropy created reinforcing rather than replacing the brotherhood that had always united the warriors of Jorrvaskr. Najeda Stonearm approached the altar with the practical efficiency that had marked her entire career as a companion, treating the ritual as simply another form of training that would enhance her ability to serve others. Her weathered hands settled upon the stone surface with the same competent grip she had always used when wielding sword and shield, and her voice carried the matter-of-fact tone of a warrior stating simple facts. I have always sought to become the most effective protector possible, she declared. If lycanthropy will make me better able to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, then I embrace this gift with gratitude and determination. The transformation recognized her straightforward acceptance and proceeded with businesslike efficiency, integrating the lupine aspects of her new nature with the practical competence that had always characterized her approach to combat. She felt her tactical awareness expanding as enhanced senses provided information that would make her a more effective warrior, while her human judgment remained intact to direct these new capabilities toward honorable purposes. Rhea stepped forward with barely contained excitement, her younger perspective allowing her to view the transformation as the ultimate adventure rather than a burden to be accepted reluctantly. When she placed her hands upon the altar, the moonlight seemed to intensify around her, as if responding to the enthusiasm she brought to the ritual. "I joined the companions seeking the chance to make a meaningful difference in the world," she said, her voice bright with anticipation. "This gift represents exactly the kind of extraordinary experience I hope to find. The opportunity to become something beyond ordinary limitations while serving a cause greater than myself." The transformation that flowed through her seemed to respond to her eager acceptance with particular vigor, awakening aspects of her nature that had always yearned for experiences beyond conventional boundaries. She felt herself becoming a bridge between the mortal world and realm of spirits, a living connection to forces that few humans ever glimpsed directly. But this was the final member of their group to approach the altar, his tactical mind having spent the waiting time analyzing everything he had observed about the transformation process. When his hands settled upon the stone surface, he spoke with the precision of a strategist who had calculated all possible outcomes and reached the optimal conclusion. "I accept this gift as a weapon in service of justice," he declared. "The enhanced capabilities it provides will be directed toward protecting those who cannot protect themselves, and the wisdom gained through dual nature will guide the companions toward greater effectiveness in all our endeavors." His transformation proceeded with methodical thoroughness, integrating the bestial aspects of lycanthropy with the analytical intelligence that had always marked him as one of the most tactically gifted among the companions. He felt his awareness expanding to encompass new forms of perception and understanding, capabilities that would make him a more effective protector while remaining grounded in the principles that had always guided his service. As the final member of their group completed his transformation, the grove fell into a profound silence that seemed to acknowledge the magnitude of what had just occurred. The 6 companions who had entered the clearing as purely human warriors had become something new, living bridges between the mortal world and the realm of spirits that existed beyond normal perception. They remained essentially themselves, their personalities and principles unchanged, but now they possessed capabilities that would allow them to serve their oaths in ways previously impossible. The moonlight that bathed the sacred grove seemed to pulse with approval, and for a moment they could all sense the presence of Hircine himself, the Daedric prince whose blessing had elevated them beyond mortal limitations. The ancient pact between the companions and the forces they served had been renewed and redefined, creating possibilities that would echo through generations of warriors yet unborn. Anela stood before them with obvious satisfaction, her role as messenger and guide complete. "You are no longer merely human," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority, "but neither have you abandoned your humanity. You have become something new, living proof that lycanthropy can serve honor rather than hunger, that the beast within can be directed by wisdom toward noble purposes." The transformation was complete, but their true journey was only beginning. They would need to learn to master their dual nature, to balance human wisdom with lupine instinct, to prove that the gifts they had received would enhance rather than compromise their service to the companions and the people of Skyrim. The journey back to Jorrvaskr took place in the pre-dawn hours, when the world lay suspended between night and day, between the realm of dreams and the harsh realities of mortal existence. The 6 transformed companions moved through the forest with new awareness, their enhanced senses revealing layers of information that had previously been hidden from human perception. Every scent told a story, every sound carried meaning, and the very air seemed alive with currents of energy that connected all living things in an intricate web of existence. Kodlak led their small procession with the same steady authority that had always marked his leadership, but now his guidance was informed by perceptions that extended far beyond normal human capabilities. He could sense the emotional state of each of his companions, could feel the subtle bonds that lycanthropy had created between them, bonds that reinforced rather than replaced the brotherhood that had always united the warriors of Jorrvaskr. The pack instincts that stirred within his blood served to strengthen his protective instincts rather than compromise his human judgment. The forest around them seemed different now, not because it had changed, but because they possessed new eyes with which to see it. Ancient trees that had appeared merely large before now revealed themselves as living monuments to centuries of growth and endurance. The carved stones they had passed on their journey to the grove spoke to them in ways they could not have understood with purely human minds, their runic inscriptions whispering of pacts and oaths that stretched back to the earliest days of Nordic civilization. As they walked, each of the transformed companions began to understand the true nature of what they had accepted. The lycanthropy that flowed through their veins was not the mindless curse that afflicted common werewolves, not the savage hunger that stripped away reason and left only bestial fury. Instead, it was a perfect synthesis of human intelligence and lupine instinct, a gift that enhanced their existing capabilities while preserving everything that made them who they were. Vilkas found, to his surprise, that the rigid self-discipline he had always maintained was not threatened by the primal instincts that now stirred within him. Rather, the wolf spirit provided new tools for channeling his protective urges, new ways of expressing the dedication to martial excellence that had always defined his character. The transformation had not changed his essential nature, but had given him additional means of fulfilling his oath to protect the innocent. Farkas experienced the change as a deepening of connections he had always felt but never fully understood. The pack bonds that lycanthropy created resonated with the brotherhood that had always united the companions, reinforcing rather than replacing the loyalty that had guided his entire life. He understood now that the wolf ran with the pack not out of weakness, but out of recognition that strength multiplied when it was shared among those who trusted each other completely. The practical efficiency that had always characterized Najada Stonearm extended seamlessly to her new dual nature as she began to catalog the tactical advantages that lycanthropy would provide in future battles. Enhanced strength and speed, heightened senses that would detect ambushes before they could be sprung, healing capabilities that would allow her to continue fighting even after sustaining injuries that would have incapacitated a purely human warrior. These were tools that would make her more effective in her chosen role as protector of those who could not protect themselves. For Raya, the transformation represented the ultimate vindication of her decision to join the companions in search of extraordinary experiences. She had sought adventure and found something that exceeded her wildest dreams, the opportunity to become a living bridge between the mortal world and realms that few humans ever glimpsed. The enhanced perceptions that lycanthropy provided opened new dimensions of experience that would require years to fully explore and understand. Athis approached his new condition with the same analytical precision that had always marked his tactical thinking, already beginning to calculate how the capabilities of lycanthropic warriors could be integrated into the companions' traditional methods of operation. The strategic implications were staggering, as the Brotherhood would now possess members who could operate effectively in situations that had previously been beyond their ability to address. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they emerged from the ancient forest and caught sight of Whiterun in the distance, its walls and towers seeming both familiar and strange to eyes that now perceived the world through expanded awareness. The city remained the same, but they had been fundamentally altered by their experience in the sacred grove, transformed into something that existed partially beyond the purely human world they had always known. The great mead hall of Jorrvaskr stood exactly as they had left it, its carved dragon head watching over the Brotherhood with the same patient vigilance that had marked its vigil for countless generations. Yet as they approached the ancient building, the transformed companions understood that they were returning not just to a physical location, but to an organization that would itself be changed by their presence. The integration of lycanthropic warriors into the traditional structure of the companions would require careful consideration, diplomatic handling of the relationships between those who had accepted transformation and those who remained purely human. Inside the hall, the other members of the Brotherhood waited with the patient anticipation of warriors who understood that momentous events were taking place beyond their direct knowledge. They had spent the night in quiet discussion, speculating about the nature of the mission that had taken their leaders into the wilderness, sensing that the outcome would affect the entire organization in ways they could not yet comprehend. When the 6 transformed companions entered the great hall, their return marked by the gray light of early morning filtering through ancient windows, the waiting warriors immediately sensed that something fundamental had changed. The returning leaders moved with subtle differences in posture and bearing, carried themselves with awareness that seemed to encompass more than normal human perception could account for. Their eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond conventional understanding, of connections to forces that existed outside the boundaries of mortal existence. Yet beneath these changes, the essential character of each warrior remained intact and recognizable. Kodlak still carried himself with the quiet authority that had always marked his leadership. Vilkas maintained the stern discipline that defined his approach to combat. Farkas retained the loyal simplicity that made him beloved among his shield brothers. The transformation had enhanced rather than replaced their fundamental nature, adding new capabilities without compromising the principles that had always guided their service. The integration of lycanthropic warriors into the Brotherhood would not happen overnight, but would require patient work to establish new traditions and protocols that accommodated the dual nature of some members while preserving the unity that had always been the companions' greatest strength. Those who had undergone transformation would need to prove through their actions that lycanthropy could serve honor rather than hunger, that the beast within could be directed by human wisdom toward noble purposes. As the morning progressed and the full membership of the companions gathered to hear the account of what had transpired in the sacred grove, the foundation was laid for a new chapter in the Brotherhood's long history. The ancient pact between the warriors of Jorrvaskr and the forces they served had been renewed and redefined, creating possibilities that would echo through generations of companions yet unborn. The gift of Hircine had been accepted, not for personal gain, but in service of the eternal hunt that sought to protect the innocent and maintain the balance between civilization and wilderness. The transformation was complete, but the true test of its worth would be measured in the years to come, as the lycanthropic companions proved themselves worthy of the trust that had been placed in them. The days that followed the transformation unfolded with a gentle rhythm that seemed designed to allow both the changed and unchanged members of the companions to adapt to their new reality. Within the ancient halls of Jorrvaskr, where countless generations of warriors had gathered to share meals and stories, a delicate process of integration began as the Brotherhood learned to accommodate members whose nature now extended beyond purely human limitations. The process required patience and understanding from all involved, as traditions that had remained unchanged for centuries were quietly modified to embrace new possibilities. Kodlak spent much of his time in private consultation with the other transformed members, helping them understand and master the dual nature that now defined their existence. The lycanthropic gift had enhanced their capabilities in ways that extended far beyond simple physical improvements, awakening aspects of perception and intuition that required careful cultivation to reach their full potential. In the privacy of the chamber where the circle conducted its most sensitive business, they learned to consciously control the enhanced senses that could otherwise become overwhelming in crowded or chaotic environments. The Harbinger discovered that his leadership abilities had been subtly enhanced by the transformation, as the pack bonds created by lycanthropy allowed him to sense the emotional state and physical condition of his transformed companions with remarkable precision. This new awareness enabled him to provide guidance and support in ways that had previously been impossible, helping each warrior navigate the challenges of balancing human wisdom with lupine instinct. The responsibility of leadership had grown more complex, but also more effective, as he learned to direct the enhanced capabilities of his pack toward the protection of Skyrim and its people. The integration process was not without its moments of uncertainty and adjustment. The unchanged members of the Brotherhood initially approached their transformed colleagues with a mixture of curiosity and caution, uncertain how to interact with warriors who possessed capabilities that existed beyond normal human understanding. Conversations that had once flowed easily sometimes faltered as participants struggled to bridge the gap between purely mortal perspectives and awareness that now encompassed spiritual dimensions previously hidden from human perception. Yet the fundamental bonds of brotherhood that had always united the companions proved stronger than any temporary awkwardness caused by the transformation. As days passed into weeks, the organization's younger members began to understand that their transformed leaders remained essentially the same people they had always been, their principles and dedication unchanged despite the enhancement of their capabilities. The lycanthropic gift had added new dimensions to their service rather than replacing the honor and courage that had always defined their character. Vilkas found that his approach to training and combat instruction was enriched by his enhanced understanding of physical movement and tactical awareness. The primal instincts that now informed his perception allowed him to detect weaknesses and opportunities that would have remained hidden to purely human observation, enabling him to provide more effective guidance to the warriors under his instruction. His stern demeanor remained unchanged, but his teaching methods became more nuanced as he learned to incorporate insights gained through his dual nature. The practical applications of lycanthropic enhancement began to manifest in subtle but significant ways throughout the Brotherhood's daily operations. Scouting missions that had previously required days of careful reconnaissance could now be completed in hours by warriors whose enhanced senses could detect threats and opportunities across vast distances. Patrols that protected Whiteron's trade routes became more effective as lycanthropic companions proved capable of tracking bandits and wild animals through terrain that would have challenged purely human trackers. Farkas discovered that his simple and direct approach to problem-solving was enhanced rather than complicated by the transformation, as the clarity of lupine instinct provided additional tools for understanding situations that might have proven confusing to purely rational analysis. His loyal nature found new expression through the pack bonds that connected him to his transformed shield brothers, creating layers of mutual support and understanding that strengthened the entire brotherhood. The community of Whiteron began to sense that something had changed within the walls of Jorrvaskr, though the precise nature of that change remained hidden from public knowledge. Citizens who sought aid from the companions found their requests addressed with enhanced efficiency and effectiveness, as lycanthropic warriors proved capable of accomplishing tasks that had previously required larger groups or longer timeframes. Threats that had once posed significant challenges to the city's security were resolved with a speed and precision that impressed even the most skeptical observers. Najada Stonearm embraced her enhanced capabilities with the same practical efficiency that had always characterized her approach to combat and leadership. The tactical advantages provided by lycanthropy were carefully catalogued and integrated into her understanding of battlefield dynamics, enabling her to develop new strategies that maximized the effectiveness of mixed groups containing both transformed and unchanged warriors. Her weathered features reflected the satisfaction of a professional who had acquired new tools that would make her more effective in her chosen calling. As the season progressed and the companions adapted to their expanded capabilities, the wisdom of accepting Hircine's gift became increasingly apparent. Threats that emerged from Skyrim's wilderness were met with responses that demonstrated the enhanced effectiveness of warriors who combined human intelligence with lupine strength. The balance between civilization and the wild was maintained by protectors who understood both domains intimately, who could move between the world of mortals and the realm of spirits with equal facility. Rhea channeled her enthusiasm for extraordinary experiences into mastering the new dimensions of perception that lycanthropy had opened to her awareness. The enhanced senses that allowed her to detect subtle changes in weather patterns, to track the movement of distant threats, to understand the emotional state of both allies and enemies, provided endless opportunities for growth and discovery. Her younger perspective enabled her to adapt more quickly than some of her senior colleagues, and she became invaluable in helping other transformed companions understand the full scope of their new abilities. The relationship between the transformed and unchanged members of the Brotherhood continued to evolve as both groups learned to appreciate the complementary nature of their different capabilities. Those who remained purely human provided essential connections to the mortal world that the companions served, maintaining perspectives and relationships that ensured the organization remained grounded in the needs and concerns of ordinary people. The lycanthropic members brought enhanced capabilities and spiritual insights that enabled the Brotherhood to address threats that had previously been beyond their ability to handle effectively. But this applied his analytical mind to understanding the strategic implications of having lycanthropic warriors within the companions' ranks, developing new protocols and procedures that maximized the effectiveness of their enhanced capabilities while preserving the traditions and principles that had always defined the Brotherhood. His tactical genius found new expression as he learned to coordinate the activities of mixed groups whose members possessed different but complementary strengths. The evening gatherings in Jorrvaskr's Great Hall took on new dimensions as transformed and unchanged warriors shared stories of their recent adventures, each group contributing perspectives that enriched the understanding of all present. The mead that flowed freely during these sessions seemed to taste sweeter when shared among shield brothers who had proven that fundamental differences in nature need not compromise the bonds of loyalty and mutual respect that defined their brotherhood. As autumn deepened and the first snows began to dust the peaks surrounding Whiterun, the companions had successfully navigated the challenges of integrating lycanthropic warriors into their traditional structure. The transformation that had initially seemed so momentous had become simply another aspect of their service, another tool in their arsenal of capabilities dedicated to protecting Skyrim and its people. The ancient pact between the Brotherhood and the forces they served had been renewed and strengthened, creating foundations for continued service that would extend through generations yet unborn. The gift of Hircine had been accepted, not for personal gain, but in service of ideals that transcended individual ambition, and the wisdom of that choice was confirmed through the enhanced effectiveness of the companions in fulfilling their oaths to protect the innocent and uphold justice throughout the northern province. Winter settled over Skyrim with its characteristic beauty and harshness, blanketing the ancient landscape in snow that transformed familiar terrain into something that seemed both magical and mysterious. Within the walls of Jorrvaskr, the transformed companions discovered that their enhanced nature allowed them to appreciate the seasonal changes in ways that had previously been impossible. Their heightened senses revealing subtle variations in scent and sound that told rich stories about the natural world's adaptation to the cold months ahead. The deeper understanding that came with lycanthropy extended far beyond mere physical enhancements, gradually revealing insights into the fundamental nature of existence that had profound implications for how the companions understood their role in the world. Kodlak spent long hours in contemplation, often standing at the great windows that overlooked Whiterun's snow-covered landscape, as he processed revelations that challenged everything he had previously believed about the relationship between civilization and wilderness, between human nature and the primal forces that governed all life. The Harbinger began to understand the transformation they had undergone was not simply a matter of gaining additional capabilities, but rather a restoration of aspects of Nordic heritage that had been dormant for generations. The ancient connection between the people of Skyrim and the spirits that inhabited their homeland had been weakened by centuries of increasing civilization, but lycanthropy served as a bridge that allowed them to reclaim their ancestral relationship with forces that predated human kingdoms and would endure long after mortal civilizations had crumbled to dust. This revelation brought with it a sense of responsibility that extended far beyond the traditional obligations of the companions toward the people they protected. The lycanthropic warriors had become guardians not just of human communities, but of the delicate balance that existed between the world of mortals and the realm of spirits that coexisted with but remained largely hidden from ordinary perception. Their dual nature enabled them to serve as mediators and protectors of relationships that were essential to the long-term survival of both domains. Vilkas discovered that his stern dedication to martial excellence had been transformed into something deeper and more comprehensive by his enhanced understanding of the forces that governed conflict and resolution. The primal instincts that now informed his perception allowed him to recognize patterns of aggression and submission that existed not just in human behavior but throughout the natural world. This knowledge enabled him to develop new approaches to both combat and diplomacy that were more effective because they were grounded in universal principles rather than purely human assumptions. The integration of lycanthropic awareness with his existing tactical knowledge created new possibilities for resolving conflicts before they escalated to violence. As he learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when opponents were genuinely dangerous versus when they were simply posturing out of fear or desperation. His training methods evolved to incorporate these insights, teaching younger companions to recognize and respond to threats with greater precision and less unnecessary bloodshed. Vilkas found that his simple and direct approach to life was enhanced rather than complicated by the spiritual dimensions that lycanthropy had opened to his awareness. The pact bonds that connected him to his transformed shield brothers created a network of mutual support and understanding that transcended verbal communication, enabling coordinated action that seemed almost telepathic to outside observers. This enhanced connection extended beyond the immediate members of the circle to encompass all companions, creating unity and efficiency that strengthened the entire brotherhood. The revelations that emerged through lycanthropic perception extended to understanding the true nature of honor and service in ways that had previously been obscured by purely human perspectives. The companions had always believed that their highest calling was to protect the innocent and uphold justice, but their enhanced awareness revealed that these principles were not merely human constructs, but rather reflections of cosmic forces that governed the balance between creation and destruction throughout the universe. Nijada Stonearm applied her practical efficiency to cataloging and organizing the insights that emerged through transformed perception, creating new protocols and procedures that would allow future generations of companions to benefit from the wisdom gained through lycanthropic experience. Her systematic approach to understanding the enhanced capabilities available to transformed warriors resulted in training methods that maximized effectiveness while minimizing the risks associated with balancing human wisdom and lupine instinct. The weather patterns that swept across Skyrim during the winter months provided opportunities for the lycanthropic companions to test their enhanced capabilities under challenging conditions as they learned to track threats through blizzards that would have defeated purely human senses and to operate effectively in environments that tested the limits of mortal endurance. These experiences revealed new dimensions of their transformation, capabilities that had remained dormant until circumstances required their activation. Rhea channeled her enthusiasm for extraordinary experiences into exploring the mystical aspects of lycanthropy that connected transformed warriors to spiritual realms, normally hidden from human perception. Her younger perspective and natural curiosity enabled her to discover applications of their enhanced nature that her more experienced colleagues might have overlooked, contributing insights that enriched the understanding of the entire group. The relationship between the companions and the supernatural forces that govern Skyrim's spiritual landscape began to evolve as the lycanthropic warriors learned to perceive and interact with entities that existed beyond normal human awareness. Ancient spirits that had remained dormant for generations responded to the presence of mortals who possessed the enhanced perception necessary to recognize their existence, creating opportunities for alliances and understanding that had previously been impossible. Artus discovered that his analytical approach to tactical problems was enhanced by access to information that transcended purely physical observation, as lycanthropic senses revealed patterns and connections that would have remained hidden from conventional intelligence gathering. The strategic implications of these enhanced capabilities extended far beyond simple military applications, enabling the companions to anticipate and prevent conflicts through intervention at stages when resolution remained possible without violence. As winter deepened and the transformed companions grew more comfortable with their dual nature, they began to understand that their experience was part of a larger pattern of renewal and restoration that extended throughout Skyrim's spiritual landscape. The return of dragons to the world, the awakening of ancient powers that had slumbered for generations, the increasing activity of Daedric forces that sought to influence mortal affairs, all suggested that they were living through a time of fundamental change that would reshape the relationship between the mortal world and the realm of spirits. The quiet revelations that emerged through months of lycanthropic experience gradually coalesced into a new understanding of the companions' role in the cosmic order, a recognition that their transformation had prepared them to serve as guardians during a period when the boundaries between worlds would become increasingly fluid, and the need for protectors who could operate effectively in multiple dimensions would become essential for the survival of both human civilization and the natural forces that sustained all life in Skyrim. The gift of Hircine had proven to be not simply an enhancement of their existing capabilities, but a preparation for responsibilities that would test every aspect of their courage, wisdom, and dedication to the principles that had always defined their brotherhood. Spring arrived in Skyrim with the gentle persistence that had marked the changing seasons for countless generations, bringing with it the promise of renewal and the subtle awakening of forces that had slumbered through the long winter months. The snow that had blanketed the landscape for so many months began its gradual retreat, revealing Earth that seemed somehow more vibrant and alive than it had in previous years. Within the walls of Jorrvaskr, the transformed companions sensed these changes with an intensity that spoke to the deep connections they had forged with the natural world through their lycanthropic gifts. The months that had passed since their transformation had allowed the Brotherhood to establish new traditions and protocols that seamlessly integrated the enhanced capabilities of the lycanthropic members with the traditional strengths of their unchanged colleagues. The process had required patience and wisdom from all involved, but the results demonstrated the profound benefits that could emerge when different forms of strength were combined in service of common ideals. The companions had become something greater than the sum of their individual parts, a brotherhood that bridged the gap between the mortal world and spiritual realms that few humans ever glimpsed. Kodlak stood at the great windows of Jorrvaskr's main hall, watching as merchants and travelers began to venture forth on roads that had been treacherous with ice and snow throughout the winter months. His enhanced senses allowed him to perceive details about these travelers that would have remained hidden from purely human observation, enabling him to assess potential threats and opportunities with unprecedented precision. Yet his fundamental concern remained unchanged from the earliest days of his leadership, ensuring that those who could not protect themselves received the aid and protection they deserved. The legacy that the transformed companions were creating extended far beyond their own lifetimes, as they worked to establish institutions and traditions that would allow future generations to benefit from the wisdom gained through lycanthropic experience. New members of the Brotherhood were carefully evaluated, not just for their martial skills and dedication to honor, but also for their potential to understand and respect the dual nature that some of their colleagues had embraced. The selection process had evolved to identify individuals who could serve effectively alongside lycanthropic warriors without being overwhelmed by the supernatural aspects of their enhanced capabilities. The training methods developed by Vilkas had proven remarkably effective in preparing both transformed and unchanged warriors for the complex challenges they would face in their service to Skyrim and its people. His systematic approach to combat instruction now incorporated insights gained through lycanthropic perception, enabling students to develop awareness and reflexes that approached supernatural levels even without undergoing transformation themselves. The younger members of the Brotherhood showed remarkable adaptability in learning to work alongside colleagues whose capabilities extended beyond normal human limitations. Throughout Whiterun and the surrounding holds, the reputation of the companions continued to grow as word spread of their enhanced effectiveness in addressing threats that had previously proven beyond the capabilities of conventional warriors. Bandits who had once terrorized trade routes found themselves facing opponents who could track them through terrain that should have provided perfect concealment, while monsters that emerged from Skyrim's wilderness discovered that the warriors sent to confront them possessed abilities that matched or exceeded their own supernatural strengths. Farkas had become particularly skilled at serving as a liaison between the transformed and unchanged members of the Brotherhood, his simple and direct nature allowing him to communicate the essential aspects of lycanthropic experience without becoming mired in philosophical complexities that might confuse or intimidate those who remained purely human. His loyalty to his shield brothers remained absolute, but it now encompassed dimensions of mutual support and understanding that transcended anything he had experienced during his purely mortal existence. The influence of the lycanthropic companions extended beyond their immediate brotherhood to encompass relationships with other organizations and institutions throughout Skyrim. The College of Winterhold had begun consulting with them on matters involving supernatural threats that required both magical knowledge and enhanced physical capabilities to address effectively. The various Jarls who ruled Skyrim's holds had learned to seek their aid when facing problems that exceeded the capabilities of conventional guards and soldiers. Najada Stonearm had devoted considerable effort to documenting the techniques and strategies that proved most effective when lycanthropic and unchanged warriors operated together, creating training manuals and tactical guides that would preserve hard-won knowledge for future generations. Her practical approach to understanding the enhanced capabilities available through transformation had resulted in innovations that maximized the effectiveness of mixed units, while minimizing the risks associated with coordinating warriors whose abilities differed so dramatically. The spiritual dimensions of lycanthropic experience had proven particularly valuable in establishing connections with the ancient forces that govern Skyrim's natural environment. The transformed companions found themselves serving as intermediaries between human communities and the spirits that inhabited forests, mountains, and rivers throughout the province. These relationships enabled them to prevent conflicts that might otherwise have escalated into disasters affecting thousands of innocent people, while also ensuring that the delicate balance between civilization and wilderness remained stable. Rhea had channeled her enthusiasm for extraordinary experiences into exploring the mystical applications of lycanthropic abilities that extended far beyond simple combat enhancement. Her discoveries had led to new methods of communication across vast distances, techniques for detecting threats that existed partially in spiritual dimensions, and approaches to healing that combined enhanced physical regeneration with deeper understanding of the connections between body and soul. The network of relationships that the companions maintained throughout Skyrim had been strengthened and expanded through the enhanced perceptions and capabilities that lycanthropy provided. Information that might have taken weeks to gather through conventional means could now be obtained in days or hours, while threats that might have gone undetected until they had already caused significant damage were identified and addressed before they could escalate to dangerous levels. Athis had applied his analytical genius to developing strategic frameworks that took full advantage of the unique capabilities that lycanthropic warriors brought to various types of operations. His tactical innovations had been adopted not just by the companions, but by other military organizations throughout Skyrim, who sought to improve their effectiveness in addressing supernatural threats that conventional approaches could not handle adequately. As the first anniversary of their transformation approached, the lycanthropic members of the Companions reflected on the profound changes that had occurred not just in their own lives, but in the entire character of their brotherhood. The gift of Hircine had proven to be not simply an enhancement of their existing capabilities, but a catalyst for evolution that had elevated the entire organization to new levels of effectiveness and spiritual understanding. The legacy they were creating would endure long after their own mortal lives had ended, preserved in the institutions and traditions they had established, the knowledge they had documented, and the example they had provided of how supernatural gifts could be directed toward honorable purposes. Future generations of companions would inherit a brotherhood that had successfully bridged the gap between the mortal world and spiritual realms, creating possibilities for service that previous generations could never have imagined. The gentle influence of their transformation continued to ripple outward through Skyrim's communities, touching lives in ways both obvious and subtle, creating a legacy of protection and wisdom that would endure as long as there were those who valued honor above personal gain and service above individual ambition. The summer that followed brought with it a sense of completion and fulfillment that seemed to permeate every aspect of life within Jorrvaskr's ancient halls. The transformed companions had fully integrated their lycanthropic gifts into their daily existence, achieving a balance between human wisdom and lupine instinct that demonstrated the profound potential that could be realized when supernatural abilities were guided by principles of honor and service. The Brotherhood had evolved into something unprecedented in its history, an organization that successfully bridged multiple worlds while remaining true to the fundamental values that had defined the Companions for generations. Kodlak found himself reflecting often on the journey that had brought them to this point, from the initial uncertainty surrounding Alia's mysterious offer to the current state of harmony and effectiveness that characterized their transformed brotherhood. The decision to accept Hircine's gift had proven wise beyond his most optimistic expectations, creating capabilities and connections that enabled the Companions to serve Skyrim and its people in ways that would have been impossible through purely mortal means. The weight of leadership that had always rested upon his shoulders felt lighter now, supported by the enhanced abilities of his lycanthropic colleagues and the deeper bonds of understanding that connected all members of their extended pack. The reputation of the Companions had spread throughout Tamriel, attracting attention from scholars, warriors, and leaders who sought to understand how an organization could successfully integrate supernatural elements while maintaining its dedication to protecting the innocent. Delegations arrived regularly at Jorrvaskr's gates, seeking guidance on matters ranging from lycanthropic transformation to the broader questions of how mortal institutions could adapt to address threats that existed partially in spiritual dimensions. The younger members of the Brotherhood had proven remarkably adaptable in learning to work alongside their transformed colleagues, developing skills and awareness that approached supernatural levels even without undergoing lycanthropic transformation themselves. The training methods established by Vilkas had created a new generation of warriors who understood and respected the dual nature of some of their shield brothers while excelling in their own purely human capabilities. The integration had been so successful that new recruits often could not immediately distinguish between transformed and unchanged members based on their behavior and dedication to honor. Farkas had become a symbol of the Brotherhood's successful evolution, his simple and direct nature providing a model for how lycanthropic gifts could enhance rather than replace the fundamental qualities that defined a true companion. His loyalty to his shield brothers encompassed both human and transformed members equally, demonstrating that the bonds of brotherhood transcended any differences in supernatural capabilities. His example had been instrumental in helping other members of the organization accept and celebrate the diversity of strengths that now characterized their ranks. The practical applications of lycanthropic enhancement had revolutionized the companions' approach to many of their traditional responsibilities. Trade routes that had once required constant patrols to remain secure could now be protected by smaller groups of warriors whose enhanced senses and physical capabilities enabled them to detect and address threats with unprecedented efficiency. The holds of Skyrim had experienced a dramatic reduction in banditry and monster attacks, as word spread among criminal elements that the companions now possessed abilities that made evasion or resistance virtually impossible. The Jada Stone Arm had completed her comprehensive documentation of the techniques and strategies that proved most effective in coordinating lycanthropic and unchanged warriors, creating training materials that would preserve their hard-won knowledge for future generations. Her systematic approach to understanding and optimizing their enhanced capabilities had resulted in tactical innovations that were being studied and adopted by military organizations throughout the northern provinces of Tamriel. The spiritual dimensions of their transformation had yielded benefits that extended far beyond simple combat effectiveness, as the lycanthropic companions had developed relationships with forces and entities that existed in realms normally hidden from human perception. These connections enabled them to serve as mediators in conflicts that might otherwise have escalated to threaten entire communities, while also providing early warning of supernatural threats that conventional intelligence gathering could never have detected. Rhea had emerged as one of the most skilled practitioners of the mystical arts that lycanthropic transformation had made accessible, developing techniques for communication, detection, and healing that combined enhanced physical capabilities with deeper understanding of the connections between material and spiritual existence. Her innovations had proven particularly valuable in situations where conventional approaches had failed to address complex problems that involve both mortal and supernatural elements. The influence of the transformed companions extended throughout Skyrim's social and political structures, as leaders at every level had learned to appreciate the unique capabilities they brought to addressing challenges that exceeded the scope of conventional solutions. The various Jarls consulted regularly with Jorrvaskr's leadership on matters involving supernatural threats, while the College of Winterhold had established formal protocols for cooperation in situations that required both magical knowledge and lycanthropic abilities. Athis had refined his strategic frameworks to create comprehensive approaches for utilizing lycanthropic capabilities that maximize their effectiveness while preserving the safety and unity of mixed groups containing both transformed and unchanged members. His tactical genius had elevated the art of supernatural warfare to new levels of sophistication, creating methodologies that were being studied by military theorists throughout Tamriel. As the seasons continued their eternal cycle and the transformed companions settled into the comfortable rhythms of their enhanced existence, the wisdom of their original decision became increasingly apparent. The gift of Hircine had proven to be not simply a source of individual empowerment, but a catalyst for collective evolution that had elevated the entire brotherhood to unprecedented levels of effectiveness and spiritual understanding. The ancient halls of Jorrvaskr echoed with the laughter and conversations of warriors who had successfully navigated one of the most profound transformations in the organization's long history, proving that change and tradition could coexist when guided by wisdom and dedication to honorable principles. The companions had become something new while remaining essentially themselves, enhanced in capability but unchanged in their fundamental commitment to protecting those who could not protect themselves. The peaceful completion of their transformation marked not an ending, but a new beginning for an organization that had successfully evolved to meet the challenges of a changing world while preserving the values that had always defined their service to Skyrim and its people. Section 15. Eternal Peace. 1,000 words. As the seasons turned and years passed like pages in an ancient tome, the transformed companions settled into a rhythm of existence that seemed to exist outside the normal flow of time. The lycanthropic gifts that had once seemed so momentous and life-changing had become simply another aspect of their service, integrated so seamlessly into their daily lives that younger members of the Brotherhood could scarcely imagine Jorrvaskr without the enhanced capabilities that now defined their organization. The ancient mead hall continued to stand as it always had, its carved dragon head watching over Whiterun with patient vigilance, but within its walls dwelt warriors whose nature bridged the gap between mortal and immortal realms. Kodlak spent his final years as harbinger in peaceful contemplation of the legacy he would leave behind, satisfied that the decision to accept Hircine's gift had elevated the companions to heights of effectiveness and spiritual understanding that previous generations could never have achieved. The transformation that had once seemed so uncertain and fraught with potential danger had proven to be the salvation of their brotherhood, enabling them to serve Skyrim and its people during an age when supernatural threats required supernatural responses. His weathered features reflected the contentment of a leader who had successfully guided his followers through fundamental change while preserving the principles that had always defined their service. The network of relationships that the lycanthropic companions had established throughout Skyrim's holds continued to strengthen with each passing year, creating bonds of trust and cooperation that transcended the traditional boundaries between mortal and spiritual existence. Villages that had once lived in fear of monsters emerging from the wilderness now rested secure in the knowledge that protectors watched over them whose capabilities matched or exceeded those of any supernatural threat. The balance between civilization and the wild had been restored through the efforts of warriors who understood both domains intimately. Vilkas had become a legend among the younger generation of companions, his training methods producing warriors whose skills approached supernatural levels even without undergoing lycanthropic transformation themselves. His stern dedication to martial excellence had been enhanced rather than compromised by his dual nature, creating teaching approaches that prepared students for challenges that extended far beyond conventional combat. The discipline and honor that had always characterized his service found new expression through his enhanced understanding of the forces that governed conflict and resolution throughout the natural world. The great hall of Jorrvaskr echoed with stories told during evening gatherings, tales of adventures and achievements that would have seemed impossible to previous generations of companions. Dragons faced and defeated, ancient spirits appeased through diplomacy rather than violence, bandits tracked across vast distances through terrain that should have provided perfect concealment, all testament to the enhanced capabilities that lycanthropy had brought to their service. Yet beneath these extraordinary accomplishments lay the same fundamental dedication to protecting the innocent that had always motivated the Brotherhood. Farkas had aged with the simple grace that had always characterized his approach to life, his loyalty to his shield brothers, encompassing both transformed and unchanged members with equal devotion. The pack bonds that connected the lycanthropic companions had deepened over the years, creating networks of mutual support and understanding that transcended verbal communication. His presence served as a living reminder that the most profound transformations were those that enhanced rather than replaced the essential qualities that defined a person's character. The influence of the transformed companions extended far beyond the borders of Skyrim. As scholars and warriors from throughout Tamriel came to study their methods and seek guidance on matters involving the integration of supernatural abilities with mortal institutions. The example they had established demonstrated that lycanthropy need not be a curse that stripped away humanity, but could instead serve as a bridge that connected mortal wisdom with immortal strength in service of noble ideals. Najada Stonearm had compiled her lifetime of experience into comprehensive manuals that would guide future generations of companions in understanding and utilizing the gifts that some among them would inherit. Her practical approach to documenting lycanthropic capabilities had created resources that preserved hard-won knowledge while maintaining the secrecy necessary to protect both the Brotherhood and the wider world from those who might seek to abuse such power for selfish purposes. The spiritual dimensions of their transformation had yielded insights that extended far beyond the immediate concerns of combat and protection, revealing connections between all forms of life that existed throughout Skyrim's diverse ecosystems. The lycanthropic companions had become guardians not just of human communities but of the delicate relationships that maintained the province's natural balance. Their enhanced perception allowed them to detect and address threats to this balance before they could escalate to endanger entire regions. Rhea had emerged as one of the most accomplished practitioners of the mystical arts that lycanthropic awareness had made accessible, her innovations in communication, detection, and healing becoming standard practices that enhanced the effectiveness of the entire Brotherhood. Her enthusiasm for extraordinary experiences had been channeled into discoveries that benefited not just the companions, but all those who sought to understand the connections between material and spiritual existence. This had refined his strategic genius to create tactical frameworks that were studied by military theorists throughout Tamriel. His analytical approach to supernatural warfare, establishing methodologies that maximized effectiveness while preserving the safety and unity that had always characterized the Companions' operations. His legacy lived on in the countless conflicts resolved and disasters prevented through the application of principles he had developed during his years of service. As evening settled over Jorrvaskr and the transformed Companions gathered for their traditional meal, the ancient hall seemed to pulse with the accumulated wisdom and experience of generations of warriors who had dedicated their lives to serving others. The mead that flowed freely during these gatherings tasted sweeter when shared among shield brothers whose bonds had been tested and strengthened through trials that few mortals could even imagine. The gift of Hircine had proven to be not an end but a beginning, opening possibilities for service that would continue as long as there were those who valued honor above personal gain and duty above individual comfort. In the quiet moments between stories and laughter, the lycanthropic companions could sense the approval of the Daedric prince who had elevated them beyond mortal limitations, knowing that they had proven worthy of the trust placed in them. And so, in the peaceful halls of Jorrvaskr, where firelight danced across ancient stones, and the voices of true warriors mingled in celebration of brotherhood that transcended the boundaries between mortal and immortal existence, the eternal hunt continued, guided by wisdom, strengthened by honor, and dedicated forever to the protection of those who could not protect themselves.